The village of Abbullah had not seen rain in 7 moons. The earth cracked under bare feet, splitting like dried skin. Women walked miles to the shrinking river, only to return with clay-colored water that reeked of rot. The yam fields lay barren, and the goats bleated with ribs poking through their sides like fingers reaching for help. People stopped singing. Children stopped laughing. Even the birds had flown elsewhere, seeking greener trees. But one evening, as the sky burned purple and orange with the setting sun, a figure appeared at the edge of the village. His steps stirred no dust. His cloak was black, but shimmered like wet stone. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. Where he walked, the scent of water followed him, sharp and alive like rain before it falls. No one saw where he came from. One moment there was nothing. The next, he stood beside the baobab tree, looking out over the silent houses and the hollowed eyes of its people. The village headman, Okonkwo, came forward, chest high despite the hunger that shrunk him. "Stranger," he said, "are you lost?" "No," the man replied. His voice was like a storm far off. "I've found what I came for." His gaze swept the village, landing on one girl who stood barefoot at her family's compound. Enyenu, the one whose beauty still burned even when the world around her dried to dust. Her skin glowed like river-polished stone, and her eyes were the color of ripe mango flesh in sun. Her hair curled around her shoulders like the forest's memory. The stranger took one step toward her and paused. "I would like to make a proposal," he said, addressing the village now. "I will give silver. Real silver." For the hand of the girl named Enyanu. Gasps filled the air. Real silver? No one had seen real silver in years. Even the market traders from the distant towns had stopped coming to Abbullah, finding no profit in dust and silence. Okonkwo raised a brow. "You want to marry her?" "Yes." "Why her?" The man tilted his head. "Because she still blooms." Enyemya's parents, Chinedu and Ij, pushed forward. Their bones ached with hunger. Their roof had holes. Their daughter was a treasure they couldn't afford to guard much longer. They looked at the stranger. His hands were gloved. His boots were clean. His voice stirred something inside them, an old hope, a forgotten dream. "And you will provide for her?" Chinedu asked. "I will provide for all of you." He reached into his cloak and produced a pouch. When he poured it onto the ground, silver coins spilled out like pebbles of moonlight. They did not tarnish. They gleamed against the dead grass. The people gasped again. That night the elders met. There were warnings whispered, old stories half-remembered about spirits that walked in disguise, offering gifts in lean seasons. But hunger was louder than superstition. And no one had come forward to offer a better answer. The next morning the agreement was made. Enyenu did not speak. She did not resist. But when the stranger placed a ring on her finger, black stone, not silver, she shivered, though the air was hot and still. The wedding took place under the dead mango tree, with cracked clay bowls in place of drums and silence where the flutist used to play. The stranger never removed his hat. When asked about his name he only smiled. "I've had many. Let her give me a new one." Enyenu called him Anwa, the moon, because she said he glowed in darkness and never revealed his full face. Anwa built her a new hut in one night. In the morning, it stood with walls of dark wood no one had ever seen before, and a roof that did not leak even when it rained. Because it rained. Only on their hut. Softly. Every night. Crops began to grow near it. Goats lingered nearby, drinking dew off its steps. Enyenu began to smile again, but not with her eyes. She cooked food that never spoiled. Wore wrappers that never frayed. Her hair stayed wet and sweet-scented, though no one saw her fetch water. But she grew quiet. Children said she no longer cast a shadow at noon. Women said her laughter sometimes echoed even after she'd stopped laughing. And no one had seen Anwa without his hat. One day a child ran behind their hut to fetch a ball and returned screaming. "I saw his feet," the boy cried. They weren't feet. They were roots. The elders dismissed him. But stories grew. A woman swore she passed their hut at dawn and saw Anwa standing in the garden, unmoving, arms raised to the sky like branches. Another swore she heard him speaking to the ground. And Enyenu, beautiful, blooming Enyenu, never denied a thing. She only smiled and said, "The drought is over." But sometimes at night when the wind shifted, those who lived closest to the hut would hear another sound. Whispers like leaves turning and the drip-drip of water falling on dry soil. And always the smell of rain. They said it was a wedding, but no one could say for certain if it was meant for the living. The day came suddenly. One morning, the village awoke to find thin strands of white cloth tied to doorposts, an old signal that a wedding was near. But no one had heard drums. No invitations had been delivered. No bride price procession. No laughter of aunties preparing firewood. And yet, Enyania's parents stood at their doorway that afternoon with forced smiles and trembling hands, announcing that the ceremony would happen that very night. "It is his wish," they said. "He prefers the stars to the sun." A few villagers nodded uneasily. Others muttered that nighttime weddings belonged only to spirits and secrets. Still they came. Curiosity is a powerful lure, even more so than hunger. The sky was dark by the time the guests gathered under the hollowed tree. The air had turned heavy. Thunder growled somewhere beyond the mountains, though no clouds could be seen. Anwa stood at the center, robed in charcoal silk, his face shadowed as always by his wide hat. His gloves were the color of wet earth, and they clung to his fingers like bark. No music played. The priest, old Father Medu, trembled as he opened the leather-bound book passed down from generations. His voice shook as he began the rite, ancient words thick with dust and breath. The villagers stood in silence, straining to hear, though the stillness amplified every word. When Anwa responded, his voice came out strange. It echoed but not outward, not across the field like normal voices. It seemed to fall behind the ears into the chest, curling inside ribs like breath held too long. One woman dropped her bowl. Another whispered a prayer. Enyania stood beside him, dressed in a wrapper that shimmered like woven fog. Her face was beautiful but distant, as if she were looking through a memory. She did not smile. She did not weep. Her hands were steady, folded in front of her. When Father Medu said, "Do you, daughter of the earth, take this man?" a sharp breeze moved through the gathering, snuffing out half the candles arranged around the altar. The remaining flames flickered violently, casting Anwa's shadow far behind him, too far. It stretched all the way to the edge of the trees and twitched when he didn't. The priest's voice wavered. Enyania's parents huddled closer, eyes fixed on the pouch of silver they had tucked behind their house. It gleamed brighter than the moon. When the vows ended, Anwa extended his hand. His glove rustled slightly, though the wind had died again. Enyania reached out and placed her palm in his. The moment they touched, the ground beneath them darkened as if a shadow passed overhead. But no bird flew. No star shifted. And when Father Medu stepped forward to offer the final blessing, he stumbled. His breath caught. For a moment, he stared at the couple as if seeing something he couldn't describe. His hands, always steady before, trembled as he raised the cup. "I bless this union in the name of—" He never finished. The wind returned, sudden and sharp, blowing from all directions. Candles toppled. Leaves flew. The leather book closed itself with a snap. Father Medu's eyes rolled back and he collapsed backward into the dust. Gasps rang out. Someone screamed. But Anwa didn't flinch. Instead, he turned toward the path at the edge of the field and began walking, hands still clasped around Enyania's. She followed without turning back, her feet silent on the dry earth. "Where are they going?" someone whispered. "No one lives that way." But he said he had a house. The guests remained frozen as the couple disappeared into the darkness. Some tried to follow, but found themselves halted by thick mist that rolled in like breath from the belly of the earth. The path vanished behind it. Even the birds refused to fly above it. By dawn, all that remained of the wedding were overturned chairs, scattered candle stubs, and the priest's cup, now filled with black water. The villagers whispered for days. They said the groom never ate or drank during the feast, not that there had been much. That when meat was offered to him, it dried to ash in the bowl. That he spoke only once more after the vows, and it was to Enyanu, saying words no one else heard. They said his cloak never moved with the wind even when everything else did. And that when he finally turned toward the forest, his shadow didn't follow, it led the way. As for Enyanu, no one saw her again. But weeks later, a child wandering too far into the woods returned wide-eyed and trembling. "There's a house," he said. "A big one with silver trees and no door." "Don't be silly," his mother snapped. "There's nothing past the stream." But that night she stepped outside and smelled something she hadn't in months: rain. She looked up. The sky was dry. The stars were bright. But her skin tingled. And the earth beneath her bare feet felt wet. The house was waiting for her. Not just standing, but waiting. Like it had known she would come. Like it had grown from the ground with her name tucked into its beams. It stood at the edge of nowhere, far beyond any road the villagers had traveled. The trees around it grew in a tight circle, as if held back by something invisible, and beyond that, nothing, just a pale horizon, soft hills, and mist that never fully lifted. Enyanu stepped onto the stone path with her husband's hand still around hers. He did not speak. He did not look back. His footsteps made no sound. The house loomed with spires and pointed windows, yet not a single one allowed light inside. Curtains hung thick behind the glass, heavy as secrets. When the great doors opened, they did so without touch, creaking wide to reveal a dim, high-ceilinged hall that swallowed all warmth. Inside the air was cool, not cold like wind but still and old like the breath of something long asleep. The servants stood in 2 silent rows, dressed in gray, motionless. Their faces wore no expression, but their eyes followed her as she passed. None bowed, none smiled, none blinked. Enyenu shivered. The man who called himself her husband, Anwa, led her up the staircase with quiet grace. His hand never tightened around hers, but she felt no escape in his touch. It wasn't harsh. It was final. The halls they walked twisted and bent in ways that made no sense. Some corners ended in walls where windows should have been. Some doors opened to other doors or to staircases that led nowhere. Enyemu noticed that the house seemed to dim and brighten depending on where she looked, shadows shifting like breath across its bones. They reached her room. A grand suite of silk bedding and carved wood, though the fire in the hearth gave no heat. One wall bore a mirror covered in black cloth. "Why is it covered?" she asked gently. Anwa turned. "Some things are best unseen, beloved." "And the servants? Will they speak?" "They are not here to speak. They are here to serve. If you need something, write it down." His voice was soft, gentle even, but it left no room for argument. She sat on the bed. It did not dip beneath her weight. "And the West Wing?" He stiffened. "You are never to go there," he said, still calm. "You may walk anywhere else. But the West Wing is mine alone." "Why?" He knelt before her then, his gloved hand brushing hers. "Because there are parts of me that would frighten you. And I want you to remain unafraid." She did not ask about the hat. Not yet. But it burned in her mind. Even now, indoors, he had not removed it. Not once. And though his voice remained kind, the shadows beneath his brim never shifted. She had never seen his eyes. That night, she wandered. The halls were unfamiliar. She tried to trace her steps back to the dining room but found herself in a library instead, walls lined with books in no known language. Their pages smelled of thunder. One was open on the desk, ink still wet, but no pen in sight. She touched it. Her finger came away blackened. When she turned, she noticed every mirror in the room was covered. Not just draped, but nailed shut beneath velvet and cord. She stepped closer to one. Something inside the mirror twitched beneath the cloth. She stepped back. Later, as she tried to sleep, the house whispered. It wasn't wind. It wasn't wood settling. It was her name. Faint at first, like water dripping behind the walls. Enyenu. She sat up. The fireplace burned but gave no warmth. The walls pulsed faintly as if breathing. Enyenu. She rose and pressed her ear to the stone. The sound grew clearer. Not one voice but many. Some weeping. Some laughing. Some saying her name like a prayer. Some like a warning. She backed away. The covered mirror in her room shifted. She saw it. Just a flicker. The cloth had moved. Slightly. Like something inside had pressed a hand against it. In the morning, the servant stood by her door with a tray of fruits and black tea. One bowed and gestured to the note in his hand. She took it. Her husband's handwriting. "Sleep well, beloved?" She didn't reply. She asked to explore the gardens. The servant nodded. The gardens were lush, but silent. No bees. No birds. No rustling. Every flower bloomed wide open, with petals that looked too perfect, too still. When she picked one, the stem bled clear sap that hissed on her fingers. Still she kept smiling. Kept walking. Kept pretending. But each night the whispers returned. She began covering her ears with cloth, but it made no difference. The voices were inside the walls, inside the floorboards, beneath the bed, and sometimes even closer. Enyenu. She once asked her husband why her name sounded different when they said it. "Because names shift," he said simply. "Especially when they are spoken through time." Another night, she followed a whisper down the hall and came to a mirror that hadn't been fully covered. Just a corner had slipped loose. She peeked. And for a moment she saw her reflection, except it wasn't hers. It was her but pale. Lips blue. Hair too long. Eyes glassy and wide. And behind that other version of her, dozens of faces pressed against the glass. All watching. All mouthing her name. When she gasped, the cloth fell forward and covered it again. The mirror stilled. She didn't sleep that night. She asked her husband again. "Why are the mirrors covered?" His smile didn't waver. "Because they remember too much." Some memories are kinder when buried. She didn't ask what they remembered. But from that night on she could no longer see her own reflection. Not in bowls of water. Not in polished wood. Not even in her own eyes. Only shadows. And the sound of her name, sliding through the walls like breath on glass. The day she found the drawer, the house had been especially quiet. Not the usual silence, this was deeper. Even the faint hum behind the walls was gone. No whispers. No creaking beams. No wind pressing against the windows. It was as though the house had held its breath. Enyenuyu had risen early, unable to rest. Dreams had followed her through sleep, flashes of a woman's face blurred by candlelight, of mirrors peeling themselves open, of a scream that never escaped her own throat. She'd opened her eyes before dawn, lips dry, heart tight, and decided she would explore the room at the end of the east wing. It wasn't forbidden. Only the west wing was. The east was old, lined with paintings too dark to make out and carpets faded with strange shapes. The doors here stuck when opened as though reluctant to disturb whatever lay inside. The final room was locked. But the key was already in the knob, waiting. Inside, dust danced in the slits of light from the high, narrow windows. The room was a study, smaller than the library but dense with books. A desk sat under the window, its surface scarred and worn, bearing only a single unlit candle and a closed ink pot. Enyenuyu ran her hand along its edge. She didn't know what she was looking for until she heard a click. Something shifted beneath her fingers. She pressed again, a shallow groove near the corner. The wood sighed. A hidden drawer sprang open with a puff of stale air. Inside were letters. Dozens. Yellowed and curled, tied with a black silk ribbon that had frayed with time. She looked over her shoulder, heart pounding. No footsteps. No breath. She pulled the bundle free and sat in the high-backed chair. The wax seal on the topmost letter was broken. The ink bled faintly but the words were legible. My name is Miran. I do not know how long I have been here. Time feels wrong in this house. Sometimes the sun rises twice in one day. Sometimes not at all. Asterisk asterisk. Enyemyu's mouth went dry. She turned the page. He brought me here after the wedding. The servants would not speak. The mirrors were all covered. He said it was for my comfort but I think they are covered for him. Asterisk asterisk. She read on, the room fading around her as the woman's voice took hold. I loved him at first. Truly. He was kind, always gentle. But there is something beneath the gentleness. A fear. Not of me but of himself. I once reached for his hat in the garden. He stepped away so fast I tripped. He wouldn't speak to me for 3 days. I apologized. But I should not have, asterisk asterisk. The letters became more erratic. The handwriting loosened. Some were short, single lines. I heard a scream in the mirror. I think it was mine. Asterisk asterisk. The walls say my name at night. They say it with his voice. Asterisk asterisk. Do not eat the fruit when he offers it. He will not eat with you. He cannot. Asterisk asterisk. Enyenyu's fingers shook as she reached the final letter. Thinner, barely a page, folded differently than the rest. Its edges were damp, ink smudged as if written in haste. To the one who finds this, he is not what he seems. If he loves you he will show you the truth. But do not look first. If you do you will never unsee it. Asterisk asterisk. Wait. Let him choose. If he does not, you must leave before the new moon. Asterisk asterisk. There will not be a second warning. Enyenuyu read it twice. Then again. She stood, heart racing, and returned the letters to the drawer. But this time she kept the final note. Folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of her wrapper. When she left the room, the hallway seemed darker. She walked quickly back toward her wing of the house, passing servants who did not lift their eyes. At her door, a tray waited. Warm bread. Soft fruit. Goat cheese perfectly shaped. She stared at it for a long time. Then knocked it over. That night she didn't sleep. She paced the room, the letter in her palm, over and over. Its words replayed like a hymn. If he loves you he will show you the truth. But do not look first. Asterisk asterisk. The shadows under the door grew long. She heard no whispering, no breath behind the walls. But the mirror, still covered, shifted. A ripple, faint, like a cloth moved by a breeze. Except there was no breeze. She approached it slowly. Her reflection did not move beneath the cloth, but she could feel it, like an eye pressed close to glass. Who are you? She whispered. No answer. But then she turned, and Anwa stood in the doorway. She didn't hear the door open. Didn't hear him approach. I did not mean to frighten you, he said softly. You didn't, she lied. He entered slowly, stopping a few feet away. His hat remained on, casting his face in shadow. You found her letters. I did. His shoulders rose then fell. Not quite a sigh, more like remembering how to breathe. She wrote them during her unraveling, he said. I should have burned them. You didn't. I could not. Was it true? He tilted his head slightly. Which part? That you are not what you seem. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the fire and held out a gloved hand. The flames rose higher, dancing in unnatural silence. His shadow bent in directions it shouldn't, curling across the floor, stretching up the wall, reaching toward the ceiling like a long black ribbon. I am many things, he said. A man. A promise. A wound. And a cage. Then what am I? His voice cracked just barely. A key. Enyamu felt the words settle into her bones. Will you show me? She asked. The truth? He didn't speak. Not then. He stepped forward, took her hand, and gently began to remove his hat. But before she could see, the candle behind them flickered and died. Darkness fell. The room held its breath. And from beneath the cloth, the mirror rippled, then moaned, then laughed in a voice not her own. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was clear, heavy with dusk, and the next the clouds tore open with a wind so fierce it howled like something mourning. Windows that had never opened before cracked wide. Curtains lifted and twisted like dancers caught in a frenzy. The fire in Enyamu's room extinguished in a hiss. She was alone. Or at least she thought she was, until she heard her name. Not whispered. Not breathed. Called. She stood, robe clutched around her as the wind pulled at her braids. The door flung open before she could reach it, and standing in the corridor was Anwa, his silhouette framed in the flickering candlelight behind him. But he was not steady. His cloak whipped around him like smoke caught in a cyclone, and for the first time since she had known him, his footing faltered. And then, the hat flew off. The wind took it as if it had been waiting for the moment. It spiraled high, catching in the chandelier and clattered to the floor. Enyamu did not scream. She could not. Where his head should have been was not bone, nor skin, nor muscle. It was void. A swirling cluster of dark wind, of soft lightning, of faces flashing and disappearing too quickly to grasp. A mass of eyes and mouths that vanished the moment she focused on them. A blackness that bent the light around it, sucking in the warmth, the sound, the world. It was not a mask. It was not magic. It was what he was. A wind that had tried to become a man. She did not move. Neither did he. They stood like that, frozen in the hallway, the storm writhing around them, the house trembling. His shadow stretched across the floor, clawed and trembling. And then, slowly, he bent down, picked up the hat, and placed it gently back atop the swirling dark. The moment the brim touched where a brow should be, the wind stilled. The hallway returned to its usual unnatural quiet. The curtains dropped. The air cleared. The fire in the room behind her reignited with a soft sigh. He looked at her. And though his eyes were hidden once more, she felt their weight. You've seen, he said, his voice low. And now you must choose. She swallowed. To see what? She whispered. To see me. All of me. To know what I am. What I've done. What I carry. He stepped forward. Or, to remain blind. As the others have. As some preferred. As she did. Enyamu remembered the letters. Miran's trembling script. Her warnings. Do not look first. I never looked, she said. The wind showed me. The house listens to the storms, he replied. And the storms listen to you. He was close enough now that she could smell the strange scent that followed him always, not of flesh, not of earth, but of something older. Rain on ash. Smoke inside a bell. She looked into where his eyes should be, past the dark veil of the hat. What are you? She asked. His head tilted slightly. A question that answered itself. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. His glove was warm. Or maybe that was her blood rushing too fast. The air between them pulsed, like the breath of something invisible. Waiting. If I choose blindness, she asked, what happens? You will forget what you saw. I will never remove the hat again. The whispers will return, softer. You will live in the version of this house meant for peace. But you will always wonder. And if I choose to see? He hesitated. You will learn what walks these halls. You will see the mirrors uncovered. You will see yourself, as they see you. She blinked. Who is they? His silence was not empty. It pressed against her ears like thunder waiting to roar. She looked at her hand in his. At the shadows writhing beneath his hat. Then back at the windows where rain traced long streaks like tears on glass. Finally she asked, "And what do you want me to choose?" For the first time his voice faltered. Just slightly. "I want you to choose what is true. Even if that truth shatters you." And then he let go. He did not walk away. He did not urge her. He simply stood there waiting. Waiting for the woman who had not run when the storm came. Who had seen what was behind the veil, and had not screamed. He didn't speak as he led her to the west wing. The forbidden hallway stretched long before them, untouched by time, colder than the rest of the house. The lamps along the walls flickered as they passed, as though reluctant to stay lit in his presence. Their footsteps echoed, but not evenly. Hers landed once, his seemed to land twice. The second sound lagged behind the first like a shadow trying to keep up. He paused at a large double door carved from ebony, its wood etched with patterns that twisted the longer she looked. A sigh seemed to push from the door itself as he touched it. "You must not speak once we enter," he said quietly. "Echoes listen here." Enyenuyu nodded. He pushed the doors open and the room beyond breathed. It was vast, circular, with a domed ceiling that shimmered with patterns like ink floating in water. But it was not the ceiling that held her. It was the portraits. Dozens. Maybe more. They lined the room from end to end, each one the same man, the same eyes hidden behind a wide-brimmed hat. Each one standing beside a woman. Each bride had a different face, different dress, different posture. But none of them smiled. Some looked terrified. Others exhausted. A few turned slightly away from him. One was crying. Enyenuyu walked slowly, heart in her throat, trailing her hand along the frames. Every name was carved into gold at the base of each painting. Miran, Callista, Olamide, Sarah, Imari, Nyako. She stopped before one that had been slashed across the middle, canvas torn. "Who?" He shook his head. She moved on. When she reached the center of the room she saw the easel. A blank canvas sat upon it, stark against the deep red rug. Beneath it, carved into the frame in tiny script, was her name. Enyenuyu. Not the name of a bride. A title. A label. Like a chapter waiting to be written. She turned to him. "Why?" His mouth tightened beneath the shadow of his hat. "They never chose." He walked to the center of the room and placed one hand on the canvas. "They saw what I am. But they didn't ask what I carry. Or who I was before." She looked again at the paintings. "And if I choose? You will still be painted," he said. "But your face will be yours, not theirs. And you will not be forgotten." The air shifted. Whispers rose from the edges of the room. Faint, like threads of old conversations, like women speaking in dreams. Their words didn't reach her ears, but she felt them all the same, the weight of longing, of unfinished stories. Echoes as he had said. She walked to the painting and placed her fingers on the blank canvas. It was cold, but not lifeless. The brush beside it trembled slightly as though waking. Behind her the portrait seemed to lean forward just a little. Watching. Waiting. Silent but not still. Enyenuyu looked at them one last time. Then turned back to the canvas with her name on it, and whispered the words he had not asked for. "I choose to see." That night he did not speak with his mouth. They sat in the quiet parlor, the fire low, its light casting long shadows across the marble floor. Enyenuyu watched him from the other side of the room, her heart steady now, not calm but resolved. She had walked through the west wing. She had seen the portraits. She had touched the blank canvas with her name on it. Now she waited. He didn't lift his head. Didn't open his mouth. But when he spoke, the sound wasn't in the room, it was inside her. His voice, shaped by thought, not breath, pressed gently behind her ears like water moving through stone. Asterisk, "I once had a face." Asterisk. Enyenuyu didn't answer aloud. She didn't need to. Asterisk, "It was soft. Mortal. Kind, I think. I was loved once for it and feared once for it, and that was enough. Until it wasn't." Asterisk. She shifted in her chair. The room seemed to hold itself still. "I traded it," the voice continued, asterisk, "for knowledge. For immortality. For the answer to a question I no longer remember asking." Asterisk. Enyenuyu breathed slowly. "Why?" she whispered. The shadows in the corners thickened, as though the answer cost something even now. Asterisk, "Because I feared forgetting." Asterisk. He stood then, not all at once but like a ripple spreading upward. The firelight flickered as he stepped closer, and though the hat still shrouded his face, the air around it shimmered with something old. Something vast. "Every bride who loved me," he said, asterisk, "became part of this place." Asterisk. She held her breath. Asterisk, "Not by my choosing." Asterisk. His fingers curled at his sides. She saw them, gloved, trembling faintly as if haunted by their own touch. Asterisk, they look too soon. Or they look too deep. And the house remembers love even when I forget it. So it keeps them. Asterisk. Enyanu turned slightly, her eyes drifting to the mirrors behind the heavy drapes. So many, all covered, hidden in velvet like secrets in a closed book. He nodded slowly. Asterisk, that is why the mirrors are covered. They do not reflect. They remember. Asterisk. She could see it now, behind the cloth, behind the glass, memories etched in light and grief. Not images but presence. The weight of eyes watching. The echo of voices once called sweetly, now trapped behind silver. She stood. Walked toward the nearest mirror. Who was the first? She asked. His silence stretched like a shadow. Then the voice returned. Asterisk, she was a stargazer. She wanted to name constellations. I told her what they truly were. That was the first crack. Asterisk. Enyanu reached out to the cloth but didn't touch it. And Mirren? Asterisk, she asked me to love her without limits. I did. The house took her in like breath. Asterisk. Enyanu turned. And me? The voice paused. Asterisk, you asked to see. Asterisk. She stepped away from the mirror and moved toward him, the distance between them shrinking like dusk around firelight. Then show me everything. His hand rose, not to stop her but to remove the glove from his right hand. Beneath it, his fingers shimmered with a darkness not of shadow but of memory. Stars blinked faintly beneath translucent skin. 1,000 veins like silver threads pulsed with something alive. She did not flinch. She placed her hand in his. And for a moment the voice in her ears was not just him, it was them all. All the brides. All the names. All the eyes behind the mirrors. And above them all, the wind singing her name. The house had not moved since the night she chose. Its great halls lay still, holding breath between the walls. The portraits in the room of echoes had stilled too, each bride frozen in their canvases, eyes trained toward the center, waiting. They knew the moment had come. They had all come to that edge and turned away. But she, Enyanu, had not. He sat before the hearth as he always did, face hidden by the wide-brimmed hat, hands resting motionless on his knees. The fire cast shadows that curled and clung to the edges of the room. But this time there was no wind, no flicker, no sound but her breath. She stood across from him. Her hands did not shake. I will not ask again, she said. She stepped forward, closing the last distance. He raised his head slightly, just enough for the darkness beneath the hat to shimmer with something vast, something ancient. You already saw what I am, the voice murmured, not from his mouth, but from inside her skull. No, she said. You showed me what you let me see. The fire cracked, as though startled by her defiance. The shadows shrank. She reached out slowly. His hands clenched on his knees. You do not understand. I understand enough. Her fingers touched the brim. A wind stirred around them, soft at first. Then harder. It circled her ankles, her waist, her throat. The mirrors behind the walls cried out without voice, humming with vibrations that ached in the chest. The portraits trembled in their frames. But her grip did not falter. The hat lifted. It was like opening a door onto a sky that had never known sunlight. Beneath the hat there was no single face. There was not even a shape that could be called human. There was a shifting mass of stories, of lifetimes, faces fused to faces, eyes upon eyes upon eyes. Some open, some shut, some weeping. All watching. All pleading. Each one etched with the memory of love, and the agony of it lost. And mouths. Too many mouths. Some sobbed. Others whispered. Some screamed so softly the sound pressed against her ribs like a memory of drowning. She saw a young man with bright eyes and ink-stained fingers, his face crumbling into wind. She saw a bride, her hair adorned with stars, stepping into him willingly. She saw wars he tried to forget, names he tried to erase, choices made at crossroads where love had no place. She saw a child, nameless and crying, calling for a mother that had never been born. And she saw herself. A dozen versions. One weeping. One running. One already fading. She tried to step back. But her feet no longer obeyed. The room disappeared. No, not disappeared, asterisk peeled away star. The house fell backward. The fire turned inside out. The walls became water, then light, then nothing at all. She was falling, but not downward, falling into thought, into memory, into the place where he kept all the truths no one else had wanted. The voices swelled. The eyes stared. The mouths moved without speaking. Her mind cracked. Just a little at first. Like glass under too much heat. But then the fracture widened. And widened again. She reached for something. Him maybe, but her arms no longer moved like arms. Her body was light. Then smoke. Then just seeing. And in the stillness, after the scream that wasn't a scream passed through her, she understood the truth. He had never meant for her to look for him. He had been trying to protect her from herself. Because to look into eternity with mortal eyes was to never blink again. She shattered. When she woke, she wasn't in her bed, nor on the cold floor, nor in the library or garden or any hallway of the mansion. She was standing. Inside glass. Everything beyond her was warped, curved. The world bent outward, blurred at the edges, like staring through still water. Her hands pressed against the invisible wall, smooth and cold. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Only breath. Soft, fogging the inner surface of the glass. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, hours, days, years. Time had broken when her mind did. The room beyond remained empty. Sometimes distant footsteps echoed past. Sometimes the shadows moved as though someone were coming. But no one did. And the man she had chosen to love, chosen to see, never entered again. Then one day a girl appeared. Young. Curious. Afraid. She paused before the mirror. And Enyanu, who was no longer just Enyanu, watched her. Watched as the girl hesitated. Watched as the man behind her spoke sweetly, softly. Watched as the girl smiled. And just before she turned away from the mirror, she glanced once, just once, into the glass. Her eyes met Enyanu's. The girl blinked. Enyanu did not. She could not. And somewhere far off, in a room full of portraits, a new canvas waited. Blank. But not for long. She waited until the moon reached its highest point, when the house was suspended in that trembling stillness between dream and waking. The halls stretched longer at that hour, the corners deepened, and the light from the chandeliers turned silver. It was the hour of neither. He was already standing in the parlor when she entered. No sound announced her, but he turned his head toward her as if sensing her presence not with sight, but through some shared thread between them. The hat was still there, always there, shadowing everything, shielding the thing that had once been a man. Tonight she would not ask. She stepped forward without a word. He did not retreat. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the brim. There was no resistance. No hand to stop her. No voice in her mind whispering warnings. Only silence, thick waiting. She lifted the hat. And saw everything. It was not a face. Not even a void. It was all the faces he had worn and discarded. Eyes layered over eyes, weeping. Mouths whispering truths too old for human memory. Some cried. Some screamed. Some simply watched her. The pupils shifted like tides. The mouths never closed. 1,000 lifetimes, 1,000 promises broken or kept. He was not one man but a chorus of selves, versions of him, all trapped in this form, stitched together by immortality and sorrow. She saw herself among them. Her own face, distorted, flickering behind the others, as though she had already joined them. Her knees buckled. Her mind pulled in opposite directions. One part screaming to forget, the other reaching further, seeking more. The room fractured. The walls bent. Her name fractured in her own mouth. 1,000 voices called it all at once. Then darkness fell. When she woke, the world was glass. Cold. Smooth. Unmoving. She saw the room, but she could not feel it. She saw herself, or rather, a version of herself, sitting motionless in a chair by the fire. Her eyes blinked, her hands twitched, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. She tried to scream. Nothing. She reached out, but her hands didn't move. She realized then she was inside the mirror. Trapped not by chains but by reflection. Watching from behind the silver. He entered the room and paused before her. Her reflection self smiled at him. Tilted her head, obedient and sweet. The real Enyanu inside the mirror beat against the glass. No sound. Only watching. He looked at her, the one inside. And for the first time, one of his many mouths, inside the shifting storm of his face, whispered not into her mind but toward the mirror. Asterisk. You looked anyway. Asterisk. She did not weep. She had no breath left for it. Just eyes. 1,000 of them. No one knew where the mansion came from. One day it stood in the hills above the forest, looming like it had always been there, as if the soil remembered its weight and the trees parted in reverence. But when hunters and herders went to look for it later, it was gone. No trace. No foundation. Just flattened grass and a strange smell in the air, like old lavender and the moment before lightning strikes. Children dared each other to follow the winding trail that sometimes appeared in the morning mist. Their parents warned them not to. Not because they feared getting lost but because they feared returning changed. Or not returning at all. Word spread, of strange travelers who vanished and then returned days later, walking into their villages barefoot and hollow-eyed, lips stitched shut by silence. They didn't speak. They couldn't. They only looked around as if searching for someone they'd left behind, then crumbled into weeping when they realized they hadn't brought her with them. And still the mansion reappeared. Never twice in the same place, yet always known. It shimmered at the edge of memory and horizon with its high towers, its frost-covered iron gates, its endless windows, all shuttered save one. The mirror. The only one uncovered. It sat deep inside the west wing, where the air was always colder and the candles never lasted more than an hour before sputtering out in protest. Those who entered, and were allowed to reach the mirror, said it was unlike any glass they had ever seen. It didn't reflect the room. It didn't show your face. It showed her. The bride. She sat, as though posed for a painting, in a chair of deep velvet near an ashen hearth. Her skin was moon-pale, her gown old and golden, stitched with pearls that shimmered even without light. Her eyes wept constantly, though her face did not twist with sorrow. The tears fell steadily like rain from a statue. In her hands she clutched something small and brilliant, gold coins perhaps, or keys, or simply light made solid. No one knew what it meant. She never moved. But sometimes just before someone turned away she blinked. Or tilted her head. Or lifted a single finger as if to hush them before they screamed. The mansion's master was rarely seen but always felt. If the sky darkened without warning and the wind shifted cold and sweet, he was near. And if you knocked on the grand front door, a massive black slab carved with roses and rings and names too worn to read, you had to be careful. Because if he answered, he would not greet you with threats or curses. He would simply look down at you from beneath the wide brim of his black hat and ask, softly, "Do you believe in love?" And depending on how you answered, you might walk away forgetting why you came. Or you might walk inside. And never walk out. Old women in distant villages began leaving bowls of milk and rosemary by their windows when the clouds turned the color of bruise. Young men tossed salt over their shoulders twice instead of once. Midwives told their stories with mirrors covered and candles lit, and they always ended the same way. He asked her to look. And she did. No one remembered her name anymore, not clearly. They spoke it in half-syllables and hushes, in stories traded over fire. Some said she had been foolish. Others said she had been brave. A few whispered that she was still choosing, that even now, behind the mirror, she hadn't yet decided whether to stay or escape. That's why the mirror stayed open. Because her choice was not complete. And when the mansion appeared again, above the cliffs, beyond the swamps, between the roots of an ancient tree, people came. Not many. Just the desperate, the broken-hearted, the curious. Some entered and ran out screaming. Some entered and fell silent. Some entered and were never seen again. But some, just a few, entered and returned changed. They walked taller. Or softer. Or sadder. They never explained what they'd seen. But when the wind howled through their doors at night and the candles flickered on their own, they would not tremble. They would simply smile faintly and turn toward the sound. Some swore that once, during a thunderstorm that rattled the mountains for days, the mirror shattered. They said the whole west wing filled with screams and laughter and the smell of roses. But by morning, it was whole again as if nothing had broken except time. Others say the bride is still weeping. Others say she has stopped. But all agree on one thing. On certain nights, when the moon turns blue and the owls refuse to sing, if you are quiet and alone, you may see a path of dew-lit roses winding away from your door. And if you are foolish, or lucky, enough to follow it, you might find yourself at the base of that black iron gate. You might lift the heavy knocker. You might feel a breath behind the wood. And then, slow as dusk, the door might creak open. And the man in the wide black hat might appear. He will say nothing at first. He will only look at you for a long time, as though deciding what kind of story you are. And then, in a voice like the wind through hollow bones, he will ask, "Do you believe in love?" If your answer is yes, truly yes, you might be welcomed inside into a house where mirrors whisper, candles cry, and portraits remember. You might see her. The bride. Golden hands. Tear-wet eyes. Still choosing. And if you're quiet enough and brave enough and unafraid to look, she might look back.